It's about that time.
City Views.
What's happening in your city?
City Views. City Views. City Views. City Views.
You got love for your city?
City Views. City Views.
City views.
City Views.
City views.
Oh, City Views. City Views. City Views.
City views.
Oh, City Views. City Views.
City views. City views.
Oh, City Views.
City views. City views. City views.
Oh, City Views.
City views.
City Views. City Views. City Views. Oh, City Views.
City views. City views. City views. City views. City views.
City Views.
And welcome to another episode of City Views. That's right, our Tuesday evening meeting right here at your local cable access channel Altice 5. Bringing it to you live. And want to take this opportunity to introduce my comrade and partner in crime, Wilbert Bowles, also known as Weebo,
I'm here, Jack. I'm here.
as always.
Got my uniform on.
That's right. We'll be discussing that momentarily. Unfortunately, our lovely co-host, Miss Melissa Cross, will not be here with us this evening, but we hope to see her back next week. Wishing you the best, Melissa.
Okay,
Miss
Melissa,
you,
get back.
as always.
Parker be looking for you.
Parker, what a guy. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, it's always good to be back here on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
It's starting to become kind of a routine now.
Oh, yeah, every Tuesday.
Yeah.
PM.
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 I'm glad you finally set your clock right.
I
We
got it
hate to
set.
see you at 7:30 a.m.
AM.
here. Doug would not be here. I can guarantee you
Nope.
that. He's not going to be down for that action.
I be banging on the door.
Yep, for a long time. So, but as always, we want to take this time to thank the sponsor of City Views, Toth Insurance Agency, Steve Toth and the crew, taking
Thanks,
care of us
Steve.
here at City Views. Appreciate that so very much,
Steve the
as
man.
always. And we should probably book Steve back on the show here real soon,
Yeah.
shouldn't we?
Wilson.
Just so he can give a little shout out update on
Yeah.
all the great programs that he has to offer.
I have a date, too.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. And as always, we want to thank the rest of our crew, Catherine Pezzi, and Daniel's back.
Dan back
He
again
survived the swamp.
from D.C.
Yes, yes. And Catherine's been doing a great job lately lining up our guests for the show, giving us...
Can't do.
oh, you're going to get a spanking, dude. You're in trouble now.
Hi, Bill.
You're in big trouble, Weebo, man. I don't know why you would invite that on yourself, but good luck on that
I
one.
didn't mean it, Bill.
I'm not bailing you out, sir. You're on your own. But definitely good to have her here, and she's been spending the last couple Tuesdays here with us.
Yeah.
you know,
good.
keeping everything
Yeah.
on the
Nice and
down
fresh,
low.
flowers, everything looking
I
good.
know. The set looks like, Cathified.
Yeah, got tears in my eyes, man.
Making us look good, man. So, how was your weekend?
Weekend, Sunday went down to a Lake Wama.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, nice down there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, busy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of problem with the geese.
The geese.
Yeah,
Problems with the geese.
yeah, pooping in the water.
They don't have any indoor plumbing for the geese.
No, just outdoors.
Okay. They might want to put that on the agenda.
Yeah, they got their work cut out down there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's too bad. Long live the geese.
yeah. Look for food too. They got to bring it out somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. That's the way nature planned it.
Yeah, job security.
So this weekend was interesting for me, getting back in the swing of things. Had a birthday party Had a doubleheader on Saturday.
You play?
Yes,
Okay.
birthday party for a good friend in the family, and then a wedding later on that afternoon.
Did you get married too? Or just,
I'm
just
not
play?
getting married,
Oh, okay.
Weebo. You should know that by now.
You still got married. You didn't tell us.
I left no illusions about my marital status.
We can have a wedding on City Views.
No, we can't. No, we can't.
Live.
Nobody's gonna look. At my age, okay, it's like, no, he's over the hill, man. It's not. There's no marriage plans for him unless he's got me in the insurance policy.
Age is a number. People in the 80s, 90s getting married.
Okay, not me. Besides, I think, in fact, I was reading something someone posted the other day on social media where they said that the longer you're single and the older you get, the more likely it is that you're going to stay single. Because you just, you get, you get locked into a mode of behavior that's just, you're not as, when you're young, it's like you can tolerate more stuff, you can accept more stuff, you can adjust, as you get older, adjusting's hard,
It took me a long time to get married.
Yeah, but you did it young. I mean, and plus,
No, I didn't. Well, the first time I got married young.
Okay.
The other time I got married was 37.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, you still had, you had that mindset, but
See,
I've not been fortunate enough to go there, so something that
nobody caught you yet. Okay.
I'm a road runner, baby. I'm still running.
Yeah, okay. We're going to see. Mark that down, Catherine.
Oh, boy, yes. Well, the NFL is like ready to come back. Preseason's going on.
Giants looking good.
Our two teams will match up this week.
Oh, yeah.
The Bengals and the Giants. Preseason.
I'm going with the Giants this week.
Well, they say that third game is the pivotal game in the preseason. It's when you kind of like start, locking in your 53-man roster. So it's going to be interesting to see. And the quarterbacks that our teams drafted this year from, I think, from the same conference, got similar marks in their ESPN grades. Daniel Jones and Ryan Finley.
Yeah.
Two kind of old school traditional pocket passers, as it were. So it should be interesting. I see teams out. It's wide open this year.
Oh yeah, this year gonna be tough.
It's wide open. So, and then you have the contract negotiations going on with Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
So he's not too happy right now.
I take 500,000.
Hey, I'm just saying, man.
I carry the bucket around.
But on the serious side, though, it's like your football career could end.
I know.
Like that.
Anytime.
So getting that guaranteed money is probably because the agent has to look out for his client's best interest.
Some of them.
Well, most of them do. It's a tough racket, but it's a good one if you can get it, man.
Yeah, I know.
It's a good one if you can get it.
And we paying for it.
Yeah, definitely. So it's going to be interesting. So I'm excited about our guest tonight.
Yeah.
David Robbins here with us, and he's a very interesting a gentleman, and I can't wait for our viewing audience to get to meet him. And I think some of the topics that we're going to discuss tonight will definitely be of interest to our viewing audience. I know I'm interested because I think the 60s was probably the most impactful decade in the last 150 years. That's just my opinion. But David's going to give us some perspective on that and share his views and thoughts with us. And I, for one, can't wait. So we want all you guys to get ready. Call all your friends and neighbors. Tell them to tune in to your local cable access, Channel 5, Altice 5. City Views is going down. We'll be right back right after this.
Packers.
Viking. Viking.
Red state, blue state, vegan.
Carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
Optimist.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities,
Live.
our families,
United.
even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give advocate, volunteer, Live United. Sign up at liveunited.org.
The pain will not control us. It will never break us, define us, or keep us still. Because arthritis can't beat us if we beat it first. In the fight against arthritis, you need a weapon. What's yours? Visit the Arthritis Foundation at fightarthritispain.org.
Welcome to Fogels.
Beautiful, isn't it?
You expect options everywhere else. Why not with your medical treatment? Talk with your doctor to explore all your options and find what's right for you. Visit ahrq.gov.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
And we are back. Weibo, please. Weibo's acting up. We might have to take a break just so we can discipline him a little bit. I don't know what's gotten into him. What did you cook for Weibo tonight, Pam?
Oh, chicken.
Uh-oh.
Chicken.
Okay.
Chicken.
Well, we can't do chicken for Weibo anymore before a show because it just takes him to a whole nother level.
Send me some chicken.
Oh, my. Well, tonight's guest, I want to introduce to you. I'm very excited about having you here, Dave, because your area of interest is like right in my wheelhouse. And I think that our audience, they love, and appreciate people of your stature who have these social and cultural connections and perspectives that bring those elements of our society to life. And I want you to talk to our audience a little bit about your pursuits as a contemporary historical fiction writer, and how you've been able to capitalize on that, and how you formatted that and brought this to life here for us tonight.
Okay. You know, I kind of, Jacques, I never left the 60s. I think I fell asleep when disco came out. I realized, okay, culture's over with now. This is the day the music died.
Well,
and
yeah.
Thinking back on this weekend, which is the 50th anniversary of Woodstock,
yes.
You know, I think the 60s are really coming into play. So I have, it is in my wheelhouse too. I'm a baby boomer, and I basically have always, I kind of always romanced the 60s, except when it was happening.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that it could be misunderstood, but nowadays we are going through the same kind of, you know, seismic shift in culture that we were back then. I think it's one of the larger ones. They say every generation something like this happens. Perhaps in the 90s it was the computer coming out and what have you. But I think that from the 60s to today are probably one of the most significant shifts in our culture, which is kind of bringing our culture back to reality in a way.
Did we ever, from your perspective, did we ever resolve those issues that were so salient in the 60s?
No, that's probably why we're still here now.
Correct.
And we will probably be here again 40 years from now.
Correct.
So culture, I mean, I guess the first time I've ever heard somebody say something like, well, the kids today don't have any value, they'll never go anywhere. That was quoted by Aristotle. And it's always been going through there, and the kids have always been the teachers of the parents. And so, you know, Crosby, Stills, and Nash had that one right. And it's true.
Teach them well.
Teach your children well, everybody. And my novels, I mean, basically, my first one is called The Two-Tone DeSoto. And that introduces, it's sort of an ensemble novel, and it sort of offers up the characters that appear in my subsequent novels. The Two-Tone DeSoto was re-released with a new distributor last, it was about a month ago, in July. And then the second one in the series, The Reverend, takes two of those characters and puts it, these characters in the Two-Tone DeSoto grow up in the Midwest.
Right.
And it's really about kids and their parents and how this generation gap sort of started to develop in the Kennedy years. But then the next one takes place in New York City in 1963 and 64, with the World's Fair and what have you. And that's sort of a murder mystery kind of thing, but it takes two of the characters introduced, and you can tell that in this book, Two-Tone DeSoto, they're going to go that direction. The final one is coming out in, I guess it's February, and that's called The Weight of Indifference, and that's about a photographer who also is introduced in this book. From 1965 to 1968. He becomes a photojournalist. He starts with Berkeley and ends up in Vietnam. And this didn't happen in real life, but in fiction, my photographer, who works for also a fictional paper called the Los Angeles Tribune, which if you're really into trivia, that was Lou Grant's paper, in the Lou Grant show.
Right.
It doesn't exist, but I still use it. But he stumbles upon My Lai, and that really changes him. And it's about change. And all of these books are about how people change, how kids grow up in this one, how sort of the innocence of youth sort of blossoms into a sense of adulthood, and sometimes too quickly.
Can we hold that thought?
Sure.
One moment. See who we got on the line tonight. Good evening, and thank you for calling into City Views.
How are you today?
Good. How's it going?
Good. Did you see on Facebook Torrington the chatter about Riverside Avenue? On Sunday, somebody posted a new posting. Did you see it?
I think I might have scrolled through that. Was that in regards to the construction that they're doing on right around the gas station there?
Yep, they had to dig up the whole road and remove the road the way they made it too narrow, because if you read the article, the Torrington Fire Department had to make 2 turns to try to get down Riverside Avenue.
Wow.
I knew that was going to happen, but I want to see if anybody else, any more comments. That's why I brought it up on your show, and see if anybody else had more comments.
Now that you mention it, I do remember seeing that.
Yeah, they had to dig up the whole road and take it all apart and make it wide enough for the truck to go there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, well, you know, sometimes you got to, you know, make sure that when you're doing, you know, planning like that, that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed.
Yeah. But it's a shame they had to dig up the whole road now. I knew that was going to happen because it was too narrow there anyways.
Yeah, I remember
the fire trucks in the city are pretty big. If you got to get them down, or a trailer truck or a dump truck, we're never going to make it down there.
Yeah, I remember you calling us a couple weeks ago and giving us a heads up on that.
Yep. And then the sidewalk going up on that other side where the tax lady does her tax business, I say the sidewalk's out like 2 feet. I mean, it's way out. I don't know where she's going to have her clients used to park in front of the building. I don't know where she's going to have them parked now, because the sidewalk is way out and it's no parking on that side. It's way out. The sidewalk's too wide. Too wide.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Because before, the way they had it before, they had the white line going up, and you used to park against the curb there, and you go in to do your taxes and come out. Now I don't know what they're going to do.
Wow.
I don't know.
Wow. Very interesting. Well, thanks for bringing that to our attention. And
have a good night.
Thanks for calling into the show. Wow, that could have. Oof.
That's.
Yeah, you gotta watch that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, fire engines trying to get there and having to turn around and
Yeah,
they have to restructure the road.
That's,
and
yeah.
So,
They
yeah.
They need the room.
Definitely do that.
They definitely need the room to move.
Thanks for the call, Thomas. We appreciate that. So, getting back to our conversation.
Okay.
And talking about the three books that you have here. Now, you've taken an interesting kind of. I don't even know if I'm familiar with how you've constructed the implementation of your books and the characters in your books. Can you talk a little bit about that to our audience?
I mean, how they came into being?
Well, yeah, because I'm like, how do you? It's just your points of references are very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. I think that I do a lot of research on these novels. I would say that the books that I write, especially the last one, it's more like at least half of it is research, and half of it is fiction. I mean, half of it is writing. But this first one was probably, like 1/4 research. I do a lot of research on my stuff. And I have, what I do is research the newspapers of the day.
Right.
So I have the New York Times as it was in 1968 or 1962. Right. And I refer back to that because that's the way the news and the media presents things. Mm-hmm. And but for this one, I was visiting with a friend I'd never been to Omaha before. Okay, it's a nice place. It's flat. But it's very interesting. This whole, having been from the East Coast all of my life and brought up in Connecticut and living all up and down the East Coast, this is my first foray into the Midwest. And I was sitting on the big sort of veranda of this, oversized veranda of this house one morning drinking my coffee, and I saw 2 young girls walking to school underneath this clothesline with laundry flapping in it. Now, I don't know why that affected me, but that image stayed with me, and I built upon that image. As a result, this book came into being, and I said, who are these 2 girls? What were they thinking? What might be, what might be their cause? How would it have been in the 1960s growing up in that kind of environment? One of the characters in this book, for instance, is a gay boy, a gay 14-year-old, and he's just discovering that. And there's a couple of really kind of dysfunctional family aspects going on in here too, but it's also a novel of strength. And so I wondered what these 2 girls were. I said, well, what would be going through my mind, if I were one of them and walking through there? And that image stayed with me. And I somehow couldn't shake it. And as a result, I wrote the first scene in the book of these 2 girls walking. It's not in the book now. And what I did was I built on that. And suddenly, it started out as a short story, then developed into a novella, then it developed into a novel, and then it developed into another 40 drafts until I finally got it right. It took
40 drafts?
I'm being facetious, but it did take me a good 8 years to write this and to get it done. I'm getting better, though. My second one only took 6 years, and the last one took 4. And a lot of it was, when I was working at the time too, and when you work, and we all do, it's hard to sort of hold on to that feeling. And so since I've sort of went into my own business back about maybe 15 years ago, I had more time to write. Because once you write, you get yourself in an alpha state, and you stay with it. You can't really, every little distraction is going to break that chain of thought. And so it just keeps going. Writing is in my blood. My grandfather was a pretty well-known writer in his day, and he was Todd Robbins. And my father was also a writer. He wrote copy for advertising, and he wrote a novel also, which hasn't been produced yet, but we're thinking of bringing it out. My wife is also doing a research on a biography of my grandfather and his life and times. And my current book is a fictionalized version of that, the one I'm working on now, and that takes place It starts in Paris in 1925, but it really takes it to Nice in 1950. So it's more like a history, if you will, of a writer with a writer's block, and how he gets through that. So we're really sort of been doing a lot of research, she and I, on this, and we're sort of really putting this stuff together. So I'm learning a lot more about my family than I ever thought I would, and it's kind of fascinating. But with the other books, I mean, they just sort of grew out of that. I said, well, that's an interesting character. Why don't I write a book about that guy, you know? And then the next one, and so on. So it's sort of organic in that way, the process.
And I'm glad you used the word organic, because I know some of our viewers right now, when they're thinking about City Views and what this show encapsulates, this is part of it. You know, we want to highlight those people, those events, those activities that make our region unique and attractive. And this is part of it, because as a writer, as an artist, you create a community.
Yeah.
And people become a part of that community, especially from the artistic endeavor, because people understand the power of collaboration. And once you're able to share those ideas and disseminate those concepts, when you get that feedback, those are the building blocks of an artistic community. And I think that I've always felt we've had something special here, but you are a strong demonstration of that, because this is the elements that are necessary to perpetuate what this region is all about.
Exactly.
And that's why I was so thrilled to introduce you to our viewing audience, because I think this is something that people can identify with.
Absolutely.
The 60s was such a pivotal decade in our culture's development, and the aspect of you just taking a single image and building around that, and from that organic aspect being applied to what you're doing, you've created and become a part of this wonderful community in a way that's what we want to celebrate and recognize here, not only on this show, but in the endeavors and efforts of a lot of people who understand the value of arts and see the transformative value that it has in our region.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jacques. I think that basically Connecticut, especially this area of Connecticut, I think it's just rich with artistic talent. Some of it is waiting to be recognized.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, I'm from Simsbury, but it covers this area too, because I have students from this area who come to my classes. I teach writing, and I think that the writing community has been underserved. And what I'm trying to do is basically establish that by giving them sort of safe havens to write and to really express themselves.
Yes.
I don't teach how to write fiction. What I do is teach confidence in your ability to write. And I'll tell you, I've had some students that really have blossomed.
Right.
And a lot of it is that so many good writers can't get published because of the business of writing, the industry, the templates, and all of this kind of thing. I want to see beyond that. And basically, I would like to see this talent, you know, reach out to be available to a greater local world. And I think it's so important. In the 60s it was pivotal, and yes, I have a particular soft spot in my heart for the 60s, and I think it's something I know better than the 70s, 80s, 90s. And I think that's why I've sort of, you know, stayed with it. And it sort of nurtured that. But also in the 60s, the publishing industry was so much more open as well. It was, and it was kind of a camaraderie of spirit back then.
Yes.
Back then, editors and agents still wore tweed jackets with patches on their sleeves and smoked pipes. And, you know, it was just, we're just coming out of that sort of Faulkner-esque kind of atmosphere then into a new kind of writing, which is not, it's good. It's all good. It's great. But it sort of went into that, it's more like the business of publishing has changed, especially with independent publishing.
Right.
But to recapture the 60s, to me, is to recapture an environment in which, at least if I think about it, I create better in the 60s than I do in the 2000s, you know, whatever this is. And I, when I'm in that mindset, writers are of two minds. First, they live their life as you know, washing the dishes and do whatever else they have to do. But a lot of them, you know, it's kind of like they're of two minds. They're two people. And sometimes when I'm writing in a book, when I know it's going well, when the character takes over the story.
Correct.
And writing a book, I mean, buying a book is like a relationship. You invest money to spend 4 weeks with a book, you know, and writing a book is like a marriage.
Yes.
And the characters are like your children.
Yes.
And then when they're very young, they misbehave.
Yes.
But, you know, you learn from that. And then as you go through edits, you sort of bring reel those children in.
Yep.
And I think what happens is in my stories, it kind of brings it in, but it's woven into the fabric of the history, of the times. And that sort of keeps me in line as far as, you know, how far I take it. And it's a lot of research and a lot of studying. How did they talk in the 60s? They actually did talk differently than they do now. Of course, you know, they really had sort of different terminology that we don't use now.
Are you sure about that?
Well, there's not totally different. Obviously, we still use the same terminology, but
yeah,
you know,
I think that's pretty groovy, man.
Yeah, groovy's good. Gear was another one. Remember Gear? And now there's a lot of awesomeness going around. It wasn't going around in the 60s. Everything's awesome, you know. And I'd rather think of when somebody says awesome, I should say, no, that was commendable. You know? But I think that there's a lot of this. The Twitter has changed everything.
Yes.
The 140 characters. Writing has gotten a lot shorter, more terse.
And has become devalued in our...
Maybe. You know, it depends. I mean, Hemingway wrote tersely. He was able to pack so much into a sentence that he would spend months writing in order to get it out there just right. Other characters, like perhaps Faulkner, would go on and on and on. But and certainly Henry James did. But so there's that aspect in every generation. But this generation is in too much of a hurry to do things, too much to get it out there, too much to get it out there without much research behind it, in some cases.
Right.
And it's where it is now. It is the new normal. So this is really part of the generational change, just like a new normal was in the 60s. That was a generational change.
Exactly. Great analogy.
Yeah.
Great
so
analogy.
We go through this, and we have to learn. Us, you know, those of us who remember those times and relish them, really have to remember how much those times are kind of making these times better for us. And maybe we can teach something to them about what it was like back then. And so there are, you know, the terminology is probably very much the same, but all I know is gas was 75 cents a gallon back then.
I slightly remember those days.
Yeah, yeah.
When we come back after break, I want you to read a few excerpts from your books.
Okay.
To just familiarize our audience with your work.
Okay, excellent.
Okay. So we are going to take a break, but it's going to give you an opportunity to call all your friends and neighbors and tell them, we still got about a half hour left of City Views. You better tune in.
Oh my God, a whole half hour.
Catch it while it's hot. You heard? Spread the word. We'll be back with Dave Robbins right after this.
Really?
Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome to my block party. Glad you can make it.
The only triple doubles you get come with fries.
Last time you blocked someone, you were online.
I can do this all day. Your moves are just gay.
Using gay to mean dumb or stupid, not cool. Not cool. Not in my house, not anywhere. It's not creative, it's offensive to gay people. And you're better than that.
Learning how to kickflip 6 stairs takes determination. So will getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.
Clean kitchen surfaces, utensils, and hands with soapy water. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
And we have to thank our floor director, Doug Harrell.
Doug.
Yeah, he's shouting out the orders back there.
Yeah.
Whether we're ready or not.
Ready or not.
He's like, you guys got it.
Here he
It's showtime. Drink your coffee. Drink your tea. Next thing you know, you're on TV.
On TV, that's it.
Woo-woo.
Watch out.
You're a poet and you don't know it.
Well, I'm so inspired by, your writings here. And I don't know, there's like a little bleed over here. I'm feeling it, Dave.
Write your book, Jacques. I can get it edited for you and I can publish it for you.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh.
Uh-oh. With a hip hop.
Hip hop in the 60s.
Yeah.
Oh, it was there.
Well, I guess.
You had Motown.
Well, but I think the song The Rapper,
Mm-hmm.
I think that wasn't that officially like the first?
That would sort of be like, would that be the middle 70s maybe?
You're right about that.
Yeah. I just, again.
Maybe Lynn Berry.
Maybe.
Lynn Berry, ladies and gentlemen, was credited with the first hip hop song.
Oh, right.
You heard it here first.
Something had to cure disco.
You weren't a part of that, the little ruckus they had in Chicago Stadium, were you? Wrigley Field, where they burned all the disco records. You remember that?
No, I wasn't. I should have been there for that.
Oh,
I would have gone to Woodstock, but I couldn't find my hair dryer.
That? Where did you plug it? What did you plug it?
Wasn't plugged in. Actually, never mind. It's a long story. But then again, I love it.
Okay, back to the show.
We were here singing Manfred Mann before the break and blinded by the light. It was like
back to Dave.
We were doing the robot dance, the whole thing, You missed it.
Dancing days are here again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm honestly though, seriously, I'm looking forward to hearing some of your excerpts from your book, Two Tone DeSoto. Tell us a little bit about the book. Give us a little background before you go into the excerpts.
A little bit more about it. It takes place. It covers. It's about 8 kids, and they're growing up in the Midwest in a town basically called Hanson, Iowa, which is very much near Council Bluffs, right across the river from Omaha. And I chose that area because it was sort of, to me, it was the quintessential middle American town. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there were people coming down, teachers and their kids coming down from Chicago, and it was kind of like, it was a sort of a an area at odds with itself as far as culture is concerned. So it was kind of growing back then, and there was a growing division. And the kids, some of them had been there all their lives. Other kids came down from the city and all that kind of thing. And so it's really about a clash of not the kids, but the generation gap with their parents. So in the excerpt I'm going to read here, Two-Tone DeSoto is, it starts out with one of the characters sitting on her front porch sort of ruminating about her life. And in the background on that scene, the Nixon-Kennedy debates are going on her Dumont TV in the background. So
she's not watching it?
She's not watching it. Her parents are. And she's sitting outside because to her, basically, Kennedy and the whole Massachusetts thing is about as far away as Peru, And so she really doesn't, she just doesn't care what's going on about that. And it's true. I mean, we get that today. But anyway, later on, two more of her friends are introduced, and one is one of the main characters, Maxie, who has an older sister, Julie. And this excerpt is about Julie has basically met with Beau, her, the guy who was taking an interest in her, and they sort of decided to go out and get married. They don't have a real reason for doing so, but they just want to get out. They want to get out of town. They want to get on with their lives. These people were destined to not be together from the beginning, but at any rate, here they are, without telling their parents, of course. Beau told his mother, but Julie didn't tell her parents. And they're driving. They decided he wants to go into the Navy and become a jet pilot. Well, what he didn't realize that you really have to have a college education to be a jet pilot, but he thinks he can do this. And that was kind of the naivete that was going on back then. And he ends up being, swabbing decks. But the thing is, they're on their way to Baltimore, where he wants to go and sign up for the Navy and do this kind of thing. And he wants to visit his uncle. So they're on their way there, and they just left Hanson, or it's the day after. Actually, they've been on the road for a day, and still Julie's parents do not know about this situation. So here they are, on the way east. Morning clouds have gathered, and the forecast calls for rain. In the flat distance ahead, thin isolated tines of lightning strike the cornfields from a low ceiling of slate-dark clouds. The Mississippi River flows sluggishly, slab upon slab, below the span of the I-80 bridge connecting Iowa and Illinois. Excuse me. The choppy, murky brown tint of the water reflects the dark gray clouds above. To the right, a small tanker churns up a foamy wake as it slowly heads north, while to the left, a river tug pushes two rows of barges before it as it heads south. The top of Beau's car is up, and Julie absently fingers one of the metal struts. His window is open, and his arm rests on the ledge. The sleeve of his white T-shirt flutters in the gushing breeze, which brings with it a blend of hard city smells and clay-like electric scent of distant thunderstorms sure to come upon them. The news on the radio centers on the Kennedy-Khrushchev summit in Vienna. At least this time, the newscaster comments, the Soviet premier isn't banging his shoe on the table like he had at the United Nations last October, but now he's taking a hard line against President Kennedy on opening up all of Berlin to West Germans. The news isn't important to them. Berlin is at least as far away and as exotic as New York, or maybe even Baltimore. Julie draws her lips tightly together and worries about her own predicament. Beau went right to sleep last night, leaving her to wonder why he was ignoring her. Wide river, she observes about the Mississippi. Yeah. She decides to fight his silence with hers. She soon turns up the radio as Del Shannon sings Runaway, and she muses at the appropriateness of the song. By the time they get to Anawan an hour later, she can no longer contain herself. The rain has fallen intermittently as once again the Ford speeds through the farmlands. She fakes a smile. We're getting married. I can't believe I'm doing this. Feels good, don't it? Beau, how come you went right to sleep last night? Another is followed by silence. She sighs and looks out at the flat, drab, greenish scenery streaming past. Do you know you snore, like a lot? Why don't you just make a list, Jewel, of all the things that bug the crap out of you, and I'll work on them. I don't mind that you snore, she acquiesces tiredly, as though he had indeed kept her awake with it. I heard it was, like this trait among successful jet pilots. To snore, she tells him. His lips bloom into a hopeful smile. She's numb with the realization that her new life is starting off badly. Neither one of them knows the right questions to ask because neither one of them has the right answer. Neither one of them feels the responsibility even to hope. The only thing she senses is what they must do to get it over with. Julie is confident that with hard work, love will come in time. And now she had left a note with her younger sister, Maxie, that what she was doing, but told her, don't ever let my parents see this. This is just between you and me, because she's very close to her younger sister. So now we're back in their house in Hanson, Iowa, with Julie's and Maxie's parents. And he's George, and his wife is, I think, Emily. A steak sizzles angrily on the barbecue grill and punctuates George Maxwell's own wrath. He's caught up in the confusion of not knowing which of his daughters is more irresponsible, Julie for leaving or Penny for not telling him what she knew. He might have expected Julie to go out and do a foolhardy thing like marry a hoodlum with no ambitions, but it wasn't like Penny to keep something like this from her parents. She certainly has taken her punishment well, though, sitting there sulking on the steps while pondering her fate as she waits for dinner. While Julie would have stomped off in defiance on a crusade for more independence, Penny has proven herself to be the better, more obedient daughter under pressure. Maxie is Penny. Juices from the meat have ignited a flame, which leaps up to the height of George's chest. He spears the steak and places it away from the fire. The sultry afternoon sky is gray, but constipated with the threat of rain. Hollow thunder rumbles in the distance as George brings his dewy beer can to his sweating cheek. Emily, the wife, had found the note, thinly hidden note while putting out a clean laundry on Penny's bed. At first she didn't believe what Julie had written. It served only to remind her that Julie wasn't around to help with the housework. These kinds of absences have become a regular occurrence with Julie, and then in her rising bewilderment, Emily reread the note, and the truth sank in. She called George away from mowing the lawn. The note shook in his grass-stained hands. How could Penelope not tell us about this, was his first reaction. We brought Penny up to be such a good girl, Emily echoed through a hint of having been betrayed. When Maxie was called in on Julie's note, she felt no recourse but to divulge Beau's full name and the street he lived on in North Hanson. Then she was sent to her room until further notice while George called the Harper home. Beau Harper is his name. They've probably just gone out in some sort of joyride. They'll be back, Bet Harper quipped in a misty disguise of what she knew to be the truth. Her tone was naturally brazen, badge of her independence. Listen to me, Mrs. Harper, George reminded her sharply. This isn't a joy run. Your son is marrying my daughter, and I don't approve, and you shouldn't either. When they get back, they'll be married, for God's sake, he sighed. Let me speak to your husband. He's in Cincinnati. Oh, wonderful. He turned to Emily, who waited expectantly by his side with her fingers worriedly touching her bottom lip. He's not even home, he whispered. Bet heard that. He's more than not home, Mr. Maxwell. He's 6 feet under, she replied irreverently, dead as a doorknob. Who's raising your son then, Mrs. Harper? Well, let's see, she pondered. Yeah, there's me. George's tone swelled into a tantrum. Who's going to support him then? Who's going to be paying his way once he and my foolhardy daughter are married? Who's going to give him money when they come begging to us? I can tell you right now, Miss Harper, I won't be the one. Calm down, Mr. Maxwell. My son is perfectly capable of supporting himself. Oh, really? My younger daughter tells me he wears a tattoo on his arm. Oh, right. Tattoos can prevent a man from getting a job, Bet replied with caustic annoyance. I heard that somewhere. No. It does say something about his moral character, though. Mr. Maxwell, I won't stand for these assaults on my son any longer. I brought him up good. I worked hard to do that. You work? George stated disdainfully as the reality of a woman who has to hold a job sunk in. Of course I work. How do you expect me to raise a family? Excuse me, he said, then handed the receiver to Emily. She works, he told her dejectedly. You talk to her, Em. I don't talk to Reds or women who choose work over husband. She's probably a queer. Not if she has children, George, Emily assured him in a hush as she took the receiver. And that's it.
Whoa. Very interesting.
It's about kids and parents and
Yes.
how the two factions don't really understand one another an awful lot, but
And they probably weren't meant to, and probably never will.
never will. And this is where the new generation comes in.
Correct.
And this is the fruit of what Kennedy, the hope that Kennedy has brought
Right.
to the early 60s, because we had in the 50s, it was pretty, well, you remember Ike. Well, maybe you don't. I do.
I like Ike.
I like Ike. I like Ike. And he played a lot of golf. I remember that. It was pretty complacent until the U-2 incident happened, which was
Right.
a spy plane shut down over Russia. And it was such a jolt to his presidency just before he was about to leave the presidency that he considered resigning over that matter. And it was only a passing thought. But then came the Geneva summit, and he was embarrassed enough there. But then basically Kennedy came in. And the funny thing about it is, just before the Democratic National Convention, and it looked like Kennedy was going to win, Harry Truman, former president, came on TV, and he denounced Kennedy, not for the kind of person he was, but because he was too young and inexperienced to run for office. He didn't have the kind of, basically political background to really handle this kind of thing. Now, to me, that sounds awfully familiar to today. And there was this sort of uncertainty that just sort of crept in, and it was such that Harry Truman, the ex-president Democrat, did not even attend the DNC because of that.
Wow.
And Kennedy, of course, won, and he and Nixon had their debate. Kennedy looked calm and casual while he was on TV. He won on TV, Nixon won on radio, they say. Well, TV was the now main catalyst for our culture. And so Kennedy won on TV, and he looked good, and he looked really good. Nixon, on the other hand, looked like he was being shot by a firing squad instead of a TV camera. And he was fidgeting, he was sweating, he just didn't look like the kind of guy that would make a decent president to a lot of people watching TV. But as I say, he won on radio, and the vote, when it happened, was too close to call. It was 120,000 votes. I remember the count went on forever. It was only 120,000 votes that separated him and Nixon from becoming president in 1960. And when Kennedy came in and gave that inauguration speech, it was a seminal moment in defining what a new generation was going to be.
Right.
And it gave these kids real hope to hear something like that from somebody as stodgy as a president. But this guy wasn't stodgy. He was young and vital. He was 43 years old. And the kids identified with that. And so Kennedy did more to encourage that generation than any other president had done, because he knew this was the up-and-coming generation. Our parents' generation, they all sort of hung together during a depression and a war, and they were all very patriotic and what have you, but they sort of worked together. What was happening here was the kids were starting to draw apart. And it was an accident waiting to happen, even though it wasn't apparent back in 1960. But you can tell that basically what was happening was those seeds were being sown. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
That's called a generational shift.
How much what part did the Beatles have to play in that generational shift?
The Beatles. They knocked Elvis off the charts for a while. But before the Beatles, we had Bobby Rydell and all these cute kids, these white kids, who would sing these great little songs. And it was like, sappy little love songs. And then Kennedy was shot. And what happened was, and I remember how I felt, I just felt like I was crumbling inside after that. For some reason, it really got to me. And I guess for a good reason, because we thought we were presidentless. We thought we were leaderless. What was going to happen now? And so it was the first time, I think, in memory that anybody can experience what it feels like to have a president assassinated in that way. The last time, I think, was when Teddy Roosevelt became accidental president after McKinley was shot. So it's been a while. It was a totally new thing. Here was this guy promising a new generation, a new feeling for youth, and he was killed. And what happened was that it just so happened, it was a sort of, you might call it a perfect kind of storm. Kennedy was shot, that was awful. But then a month later, the Beatles came into America and took everything by storm. They were already #1 in England for a while. But somehow our culture needed something to latch onto,
right.
And it was the Beatles.
Right.
And that really changed music. I do give lectures on the 60s, and when I talk about the music, that basically it does make a sort of a change because of something that happened in culture. The Beatles came along at just the right time.
Right.
And so the kids started to really identify more with the music rather than just listen to it and dance to it. They really kind of identified with it. The words became so important in the music. And so that's what happened. And that's part of what drove this generational shift. And then along came, the Summer of Love.
Yep.
Along the human being. Actually, the Summer of Love began in January of 1967. They call it a summer, but I guess in San Francisco, January is a lot warmer than July. And then along came Monterey Pop in that later August, where Gracie Slick and Jefferson Airplane and all that sort of, they had made their sort of thing. They already were popular in San Francisco, but this was now they were getting glossed over. They were glossy now. They were entertainment. Then along came another singer who basically didn't quite make the stage the first time, but she did. She came back the last day, and that was Janis Joplin.
Yep.
And when she was on, the reason she didn't come on before is that Dave Pennebaker was making a film of the Monterey Pop.
Yep.
And the other members of Big Brother and the holding company, against Janet's wishes, they said, "Look, we don't want you filming us. We really don't want that." They were one of the only groups that didn't allow that. And Janice was so ticked off about that. And she had received such a great response from her first performance that was never filmed, that they called for her to come back on again and do the same performance. And I got to tell you, it was awesome. Ball and chain. It was just a great performance. And that put music into a whole new level. It gave our generation a voice. And then the voices turned a little bit more anti-war and what have you, but it really gave us a voice to kind of grab onto, and that was our vocal cord.
Speaking of grabbing onto something, we want to grab onto you to come back on the show, because there's so much more that we could talk about.
I'd be happy to.
And we want to definitely do that. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, Dave has 3 standalone books to his credit. And he'll be at a book signing at Barnes & Noble's in Canton and West Hartford. You can also catch him on Amazon and check out his online magazine entitled Media Culture.
It's not quite online yet.
It will be on.
In October.
In October.
And the readings in Canton, the reading is on October 12th, and in West Hartford, it's going to be on noon on Saturday, October 5th.
Absolutely. Great.
And I'll be reading at Dom's Coffee on the 12th of this month. So.
Well, we appreciate having you on the show, and we look forward to having you back, okay?
Good looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of City Views. You know the deal. If it's happening in Torrington or anywhere in the region, be sure to catch it on City Views. We'll see you back next week, right here. I'm your host, Jacques Williams. Good night.
Good night.
City Views. What's happening in your city? City Views. City Views. You got love for your city? City Views. 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 City